So, I wanted to talk about how to tell if someone actually likes you. This is something that I see victims of abuse really struggle with because they'll be interacting with a person who is flashing like contempt at them, but they're not contemptuous all the time. And so they consider those little micro flashes of the contempt as like a abnormality instead of something breaking through kind of the mask of that other person. When you have someone who likes you, they don't make mean comments to you. And the thing is, there are some people who have incorporated that into the way that they interact with each other. But that is usually a mutual reciprocal thing that evolves, I want to say, usually in like a really masculine environment. You usually see it in things like sports or um, the guy's working on the rig or something. It's a way of being having camaraderie without making themselves vulnerable. And so there are certain kind of environments where that does flourish, but it'll usually be like a feature of the environment. It won't necessarily be you're hanging out with your friends and there's one friend who keeps doing little side comments at you and then everyone just sort of goes and ignores it. Um, so when you get these like comments at you and then the person says, "Oh, I'm just joking," and it sometimes they can frame it as we're close enough that we can do that. Um, you'll know, you'll know if you're close enough to do that, and somebody could technically be close, like let's say a sibling, and decide to do that at you, but you're not emotionally close. They're just using the relationship technical closeness as justification for saying the things that they're saying. But we've been talking about this idea on the subreddit, basically, which is that people will tell you what they actually think about you. People will tell you ahead of time what they're going to do. And I'm not saying it's 100% of the time, but, let's take Donald Trump, for example. Nothing he's doing should be a surprise to anybody. He basically has been himself in public on record for decades. Nothing he's doing should be a surprise to anybody who's been paying attention. So he's told us ahead of time what he wants to do. And he'll do it in that way that you often see with narcissists. This is not a diagnosis. I am not a professional. I just have opinions. But narcissists will project onto another person the thing that they're doing or would like to do. So, for example, when he kept getting on to President Zelensky about not holding elections and basically being a dictator, he he's sort of flashing us like his little preview plans of what he'd like to do. But he never says it, this is what I would like to do. Um, but, again, the way people will sort of tell you the truth is in these little sideways ways that aren't necessarily taking ownership of what they think or feel or what they'd like to do or what they are doing. And so it's very confusing when you're taking somebody at their word, but you're not taking them at the words that necessarily matter. And it's very easy to be talked out of taking what they've said seriously or talked out of, thinking that this is representative of what they actually think. And one thing that helped me with this was realizing that they wouldn't say it unless they thought it at some point. Granted, we all have thoughts that come in our minds and we don't necessarily agree with them, but we certainly don't say them if we don't agree with them, right? So they had the thought and then said it. Those two things together are pretty indicative of what you could likely be dealing with. And another thing I wanted to say is when you have someone who's extremely judgmental toward you, they're not giving you the benefit of the doubt. And the reason they're not giving you the benefit of the doubt is because they don't like you. This one took me way too long to learn because I think a lot of victims of abuse think that we can fix whatever it is and then that person will treat us better or like us. And it's kind of like when you have a favorite color versus a color you hate. You might have a shade in the color that you hate that you actually like. But pretty much 99% of the rest of the shades, you're not going to be feeling. And you can have just about any shade in the color you actually like and like all of them. It took me a long time to figure that one out too because I really like blues with hints of green and greens with hints of blue. And I would be out and I'd get I tell my son, I call them the gimmies. I'd be like, ah, oh, I need this. And then go home from, this is back in the day before they were terrible, but go home from a Target run with way too many things I spent money on. Like, how did this happen? And it was because they were going through a fashion phase of like teal and turquoise. And I was just like, oh, I love it. I love it, you know? So basically, the person who likes you is going to be very generous toward you. When you make mistakes, they're going to pretty much give you like the best interpretation of what that is. They're going to have a lot of patience with you, a lot of kindness. They don't like you. That is all out the window. And they're extremely judgmental and they're going to present it to you like it's your fault, like you failed in some way. And it's not. This is a beauty is in the eye of the beholder situation. You are being beheld, but not for your beauty. So being able to clock when someone has that covert aggression or they don't like us. So they might be nice most of the time, or they might be polite. And so you think, oh, you know, we're friends, or this person likes me. And that may not be the case. And most of the time, I feel like our gut kind of lets us know, at least for a moment, like, oh, did they mean that? Like, that was kind of mean. And just getting into that habit of listening to that little voice inside that's letting us know, like, this person may not like me. They're not giving me the benefit of the doubt. They're not kind to me. They're assuming the worst possible interpretation. And the thing is, what is wild to me is like, we're grown-ups. You know, this is not for kids, obviously. We're grown-ups. Nobody has to hang out with someone they don't want to hang out with, unless you're in a work environment. And so obviously if you're navigating a work environment, you're going to have to be extremely strategic. But in general, if someone doesn't like you, they don't have to be around you. They don't have to hang out with you. Where this really shows up in a tricky way is going to be friend groups. And so they're usually hiding their dislike of you so that they can pretend and still be in their friend group. And so when they start to be mean to you, and let's say it escalates into kind of like an abuse situation, everyone's like, oh no, but they like you. It must just be this. So friend groups can be a trap. But if you know that they don't like you, you can make choices for your own best interest and safety, versus taking them at their word that they don't mean it when they actually do. Anyway, I hope this makes sense, and I'll talk to you next time.